Do you know who the founder of Planned Parenthood was? We're going to look at this angel of death on today's program. This is the voice of resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome to the broadcast, friend. We are in Memphis, Tennessee. We're going to be here for a while, so we're doing some transitioning with our studio. We have a son who has cancer and is being treated at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We thank God for these people, and we ask you, our Christian brothers and sisters, to please pray for our son. His name is Michael, that he has a complete healing and defeats this cancer, and please God that he lives a long and normal life. Margaret Sanger, we're going to look at her today. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood. History is written by victors, okay? So if the bad guys win, say the communists, then they write a history for their communist people. They control the narrative. And right now, Planned Parenthood is winning. And so the narrative in everyday life makes Margaret Sanger a hero. I mean, after all, President Obama, the first sitting president to speak at a Planned Parenthood conference, praised the opening of the first Planned Parenthood clinic founded by Margaret Sanger. But the ultimate victor is God. Therefore, the ultimate history will be written by the angelic and by the divine, not by the demonic and the human. And when the final history is recorded, all of heaven and all of hell will see what Margaret Sanger was all about. And for those of you with ears to hear and with eyes to see, we're going to introduce you to this woman on today's program.
Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. Have mercy on us.
Like a dark Joan of Arc, she flung herself headlong into battle against the church, against the covenant of marriage, against the laws of God himself. Hundreds of millions of men, women, and children have lived and died in the world that was created by her vision. I'm speaking of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. We're going to focus on her today. Welcome, friend, to the broadcast. If you did not see yesterday's show, go to voiceofresistance.com. You will be able to find that program and an entire series that involves Planned Parenthood, President Obama, the Negro Project, as Planned Parenthood used to call it, and the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. President Obama became the first sitting president to address a Planned Parenthood conference. It is a mark of shame and disgrace that he will bear into eternity. He rightly said the following. Lane, play this clip.
It's been nearly 100 years since the first health clinic of what later would become Planned Parenthood opened its doors to women in Brooklyn. And for nearly a century now, one core principle has guided everything all of you do: that women should be allowed to make their own decisions about their own health.
I think that's about the only thing he got right. That it was just about 100 years ago that Planned Parenthood's first a birth control clinic was open. What the president did not mention was that the clinic was opened by Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. We're going to take the better part of this show to look at some of the elements of her life, to dabble a little bit in some of her writings. There are very few people in the last 100 years who have impacted the entire world the way that this woman has. She was at war with the church, at war with the laws of God, mocked the priesthood and ministers, both evangelical and Catholic. She called for fornication, orgies, the whole 9 yards, people. This is who we're dealing with. Now, if you've got small children in the room, I suggest you have them leave for the duration of this program or record the show and watch it later, because there are some issues that I'm going to discuss, disgusting issues that we will discuss, that probably are not fit for young ears. This that I'm about to read was written by her in 1914 and released in a publication that she used to write called The Rebel Woman. She actually was arrested for some of her writings. They were considered lewd and lascivious, and she fled the country. More on that in a minute. First, let me read to you a little bit so you get a feel for who we're dealing with. That there exists in all nature an attraction which takes place between particles of bodies and unites to form a chemical compound is not doubted. This same attraction exists in men and women and will, unconsciously perhaps, cause them to seek a mate, just as other organisms do. In other words, men and women are animals, and sometimes there's an animal attraction which produces a chemical reaction and causes people to come together. She outlines that a little clearer as this goes on. Priests and marriage laws have no power or control over this attraction, nor can they make desirable a union where this attraction does not exist. So, if you're in a marriage or even considering one, and this chemical animal attraction does not exist that desires you to find this person as a mate, okay, we're talking an animal attraction here, physical in nature, sexual in nature, then no priest, no marriage law has any bearing on that. Can you see where this is headed? Marriage laws abrogate the freedom of women by enforcing upon her a continuous sexual slavery and a compulsory motherhood. Now we're getting to the core of the issue. Because a woman is obligated with her marriage vows to only have sexual relations with one man, and obviously the male with only one woman, then that woman is in sexual slavery. She's not free to have sex with anyone that she wants, with whom she feels this chemical reaction. I continue. Marriage laws have been dictated and dominated by the church, always, and ever upon the unquestionable grounds of the wisdom of the Bible. Here we see an open attack on the scriptures and on the church, who clearly, she understood, clearly provide the foundation for the sacrament and the covenant of marriage. She goes on. A man and a woman who under a natural condition, like she talked about with the chemicals, who under a natural condition avow their love for each other, should be immediately qualified by this to give expression to their love or to perpetuate the race without the necessity of a public declaration. If a man and a woman see each other and say, I love you, well then let's. A reciprocal, spontaneous, voluntary declaration of love and mutual feelings by a man and woman is the expression of nature's desires. Were it not natural, it would not be so. And being natural, it is right. You see, friend, the scriptures talk an awful lot about our senses, and that there are some things that we have an appetite for that are not healthy, that are not right, that are not good, that may even be evil. So she is touching, in fact, on something that is accurate. You see somebody that is attractive, and there is some type of a chemical reaction that happens. But to then jump from that to say, and therefore because there is this natural reaction going on, that a man and a woman should be immediately able to avow their love for each other and have any kind of sex anywhere that they want under any circumstances. And a woman who's married is in slavery to having sex with only one person. And this is against nature. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to give you the sordid details, an overview of the sordid details of her life. And you'll see that she lived out this vision in such a way that makes these words seem tame. This is the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. I'll be right back.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
Margaret Sanger, Killer Angel, as Dr. George Grant calls her. She was born in 1879, 10 children in the Catholic family, very poor. She grew up to despise poverty and wanted to do everything in her power to keep the poor from having children. She married at age 22, had 2 sons and a daughter with her husband. He was a fairly successful businessman, and they hung out in socialist circles in New York City. Well, before long, she wearied of the marriage bed with her husband and began to have a series of sordid affairs. Her husband thought, I'm really not into this, and whisked her off to Europe, where the whole family went. After 2 weeks in Europe, she decided she wanted to go back to Greenwich Village and to her hip socialist friends and to her sexual liaisons, and she literally abandoned her husband, took the children back to New York. He pled with her to return. She refused. The marriage ended in divorce, as you can imagine. While she was back in New York, she started handing out her missives called the Rebel Woman, one of which got her arrested. Her daughter, meanwhile, is being neglected to the point where her daughter got pneumonia and died. Okay? This is the type of woman that we're dealing with. By every biblical definition, if you read the Proverbs, by every biblical definition, or ethical definition, Margaret Sanger was a whore. She was a harlot. A floozy is far too kind of a word for her. Well, after she was arrested, she did go back to Europe. She fled this time and spent 13 months there. At that time, she started hanging out with Malthusians and with Havelock Ellis. A Malthusian is somebody who believes that there's a limited number of resources in the world, and therefore we have to reduce the world population. We have to keep people from having babies because there's going to not be enough to go around. So the people that shouldn't have babies are the poor, the unintelligent, Negroes, etc. So she started hanging out with Malthusians and with people in the eugenics movement. As we'll see later, some of them were very closely tied to Hitler. She also had multiple sordid affairs with people like H.G. Wells, Julian Huxley, Havelock Ellis. You might remember some of these names from literature, from your college days. Havelock Ellis was by any Christian definition, a sexual pervert. She was involved in orgies, as I said. After she divorced her first husband, about 10 years later, she recognized the economic value in getting married, And so she married a very wealthy man, a fabulously wealthy man. And the marriage prenuptials that they agreed to was that she would have one wing of the mansion, he would have another. He could not visit her without calling first. He actually had to make an appointment to see his own wife because she insisted on being free to have her male lovers or multiple people coming and going without any intrusion or intervention from her second husband. This is who we're dealing with in the founder of Planned Parenthood. And she wanted American families to be made in that image. When we come back from this break, we're going to read some of her other quotes. They're more along a political nature, more specific about her birth control agenda. And you will see how Planned Parenthood today is reflecting the vision of its godless founder, Margaret Sanger. I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. Welcome back to the program, friend. I want to issue a small and insignificant but heartfelt challenge to MSNBC, CNN, Fox, the History Channel, any cable network. The data's out there on Margaret Sanger. The data's there. Do a series. Friends, you have to understand that we are being lied to by the omissions of these people. What they are not telling us about Planned Parenthood and about Margaret Sanger. I'm going to read to you from a small section of my book, Accessory to Murder. I wrote this when I was in a prison work camp, the chain gang it used to be called. And by the way, I have had run-ins with Planned Parenthood for decades. Planned Parenthood and the National Organization of Women both sued me and ended up getting my life savings, my home, everything that I ever had. Everything. 6 digits, okay? So I have a long personal history with these God haters, with these baby killers. And they knocked me down and I got back up and I'm still swinging at them. And the day will come when the blight of them will be driven from the earth. We just don't know when. All right. Now this is where, again, if you've got a small child in the room, you need to get this kid out. You heard in the last segment some of Margaret Sanger's personal life. Perverse, sexually illicit. In Ithaca, New York, the Planned Parenthood affiliate there put together a sex education curriculum. Now, before I read to you from this curriculum, play that clip about President Obama saying how great sex education is.
Laws that would cut off access to cancer screenings and end educational programs that help prevent teen pregnancy.
Well, what the president failed to mention is that every study shows that where there is more sex education, there is more pregnancy, there is more sexual activity, there are more sexually transmitted diseases. Now, why is that? Why is that? I'm going to show you. Planned Parenthood had some games that they put together for the teenagers in a high school. Again, if you've got small kids, get rid of them. Game number 1, putting on the condom. Okay? Putting on the condom. And what they did was they had kids wear signs on their chest, hung there with various stages of petting, necking, sexual foreplay, sexual intercourse of every kind of description. There are things here that I can't bring myself to read. All right? They describe every single sexual act that you could imagine. All right? In a public school for high schoolers, 9th, 10th, 11th graders. All right? Now, here's the second game, condom relay race. And in this game, they get one condom lubricated, or this is what the text actually said, or lubricated with plenty of tissues handy per participant. and several bananas, firm, not ripe. And they would run back and forth in the condom relay race, and the one person, maybe a girl, would hold out the banana and a boy would put the condom down on it, and then someone would have to unroll it, run back down, and do this again and again. This is with teenagers, okay? With complete descriptive words about all body parts and about all sexual acts. Now, what do you think that does to a young girl or a young boy at 15 or 16 or 17? Can you see that sexual chemical thing happening that she spoke about? Can you see them getting flushed and red in the face and saying, man, maybe I'd like to try this? In other words, you have curiosity, and then you have preoccupation and interest, and then temptation, and then acting out. That's what's going on here, people. This is what Planned Parenthood is. I've got to take a break. When we come back, another quote from President Obama, a little bit more about Margaret Sanger's connection to the Nazis. Don't go away. When I was a prisoner in a prison work camp in Alpharetta, Georgia, I had a lot of time on my hands to research who the bad guys were in the death of our culture. And I wrote Accessory to Murder. It is an overview of our political, cultural, media, and religious adversaries that are accomplices to the death of our culture. I encourage you, get a copy of this and learn the who's who of the bad guys. Do you want to have knowledge, wisdom, discernment? If so, you have to read good books on theology, history, books that look at the lives of great men and women. So to help you to become a more effective Christian, a better witness for truth, somebody who can engage in productive conversation that exhorts and edifies those that you speak with, we're going to do something crazy. We're offering you these 7 books for a gift of any size. You just pay for the shipping and handling, and then give whatever gift that you can, and we will send them to you. But just to make it a little bit more crazy, I will send you a second copy of my 3 books, autographed. You can give them as a gift to your pastor or to a family member and help extend truth and justice in the world. This is while supplies last. Welcome back, friend. My time is flying away. Play the clip, Lane, if you would, about President Obama praising Planned Parenthood.
There's one thing the past few years have shown. It's that Planned Parenthood is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere today. It's not going anywhere tomorrow.
All right, so there you have it. Planned Parenthood, yesterday, today, and forever. They're going to be here. They're not going anywhere. Well, I beg to differ with that, but the truth is that the reason that Planned Parenthood still exists today in this country, as they do, receiving hundreds of millions of our dollars, we're underwriting all this perversion. We are helping them protect pedophiles and the sex slave trade, which we'll talk about tomorrow. I want to lay the blame somewhere. Somebody has to be responsible for how come they're here. The blame gets laid at the feet of Catholic bishops, evangelical churches, the Republican Party, okay? All of whom pay lip service to sexual fidelity and purity. But when an abortion giant, a criminal syndicate, as you will see, literally involved in the cover-up of sexual crimes against minors, when this organization is receiving hundreds of millions of our dollars, promoting the killing of babies, promoting the sexual perverse deeds that I can't even read about on the air, and you have silence from our shepherds, then what we really have are hirelings. We have people who have surrendered to this demonic organization. Friend, we've got to fight. Contact our legislators and tell them defund these godless enemies of the family. Talk to you tomorrow. I want to encourage you to go to our website. Learn how to defy President Obama's words. President Obama said Planned Parenthood is here to stay. I beg to differ with that. If the Christian community will do what it's supposed to do, the very gates of hell cannot prevail against the church. So please, become the type of warrior that puts Planned Parenthood on the ash heap of history where it deserves to be.